Hello Laurier Shads. In today's video, we're going to cover how to put together the Shad Airplane. The Shad Airplane consists of cut foam parts, 3D printed plastic parts, and laser cut balsa wood parts. In true MacGyver style, it's held together with a combination of wood glue and elastic bands. The first step in assembly is to remove our parts from the sheets. So they're laser cut in these sheets and little tabs hold them in place. Sometimes little tabs break and you'll have a little bit of green tape holding it. You can see that if you just bend it back and forth gently, the tab will snap. If you want to clean up the little nub that's left behind, you can use either a very sharp knife like a single-edged razor, or just take your sandpaper with some sort of little block behind it, just a little piece of it, and just gently sand it until it's flush with the surrounding wood. You will notice that the tabs that run parallel to the grain snap a lot easier than the ones that run perpendicular to the grain. When you get all the pieces separated, you're going to have four kind of wedge-shaped pieces with notches on the side. There are three different types. The top one has a couple of slots at the very back. The bottom has a slot right in the middle. And then the sides don't have any slots. But there's different sized tabs on the top and bottom because they're not symmetrical. So the little tabs go up to the top. They mate with the top. The big tabs mate with the bottom. To get started on assembly, the very first thing we have to do is we have to put the little dowel adapter on the bottom part of the fuselage. We put some glue in the dowel adapter and we slide it up through the slot. So we make sure that there's glue on the flat surface and on the tongue that goes up through the slot. We then take our little cap piece, which is a little rectangle with a slot in it, a little flat one, and we're going to put some glue on it, and then we're going to press that down onto the tongue. We're going to put glue so that it goes into those little holes, because that'll lock everything in place. And we'll put some on the balsa wood around it. Then when we've got the glue on, we're going to place it down on the table so that it's nicely supported, right? So that the actual plastic piece is touching the table. We'll push the little holder plate into place and it will kind of give a little bit of resistance and then it'll move down and get into position for us. But that's why we need to support the plastic, because we can't press on the balsa wood that hard, we'll break it. So you can see it's now snapped in place and it's glued and it's going to stay there. So we can set that aside and we'll start our fuselage construction. So it looks like I'm starting with the top piece here and I'm putting glue in the slots where the tabs will go. So just like before when we built the bridges, we're only going to glue the parts where the wood will make contact with the other piece. And I got a little bit extra, so I wiped that off there. Once I've got these slots glued, I'll grab the piece that's going to mate with this piece, which is one of our side pieces, and I will do the slots on that as well, not the tabs. Because if the slots on both are done, or the tabs on both are done, then it's going to work. You can see I had a little nub there that I'm going to clean off. That's left over from those little tabs that held the pieces in the sheets. So I'll glue this up, I'll put this side and the top piece together. Again, like before, we just want a really thin film of glue. I'll use a little bit of low-tack tape around the outside of the joint to hold things together. And that will just keep these parts held in position until that glue has a chance to dry. Maybe I should have used a bit of tape with a little bit more tack. Let's move on to our next piece. We're going to glue another side piece to the top. So again, we're going to glue the edge with the shorter tabs to the top piece. So that's where we're going to put our glue. We'll speed this one up because it's the exact same process we just did. It can be helpful to place it down on the table on your newspaper, of course, to get it to push into place. So you can push one edge pretty evenly with that nice flat surface. And then, of course, we'll wipe off the extra glue and we'll put our tape on to hold that corner together. Then we'll grab our bottom piece and we'll repeat the process with that and complete our fourth side of our box, making sure that the tongue of the dowel locator on the bottom is up into the inside of the fuselage and that the dowel holder is on the outside. When we do our flight testing, we're actually going to use this dowel holder to hold a dowel to weigh down the airplane to see if it flies better, worse, or differently with extra weight on board. Now that we have a four-sided box, we can tape all the way around it, which is great because that'll make it stay together a lot better. And if you noticed, instead of putting the sticky side of the tape in, I'm putting it outward and then taping it to itself. And then I make these little sleeves. And what I do is I just slide them up the taper, because as I slide them up the taper, they create more and more tension and compress things together nicely. But then it's going to come off really easy because I can just slide it the other way. So it's almost like using elastic bands. And you could use elastic bands for this exact same purpose. The issue remaining is that the fuselage could be a parallelogram because it is a square box with no support, so it could easily parallelogram. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the nose cone on, because the nose cone has a little groove in it that will hold everything square. This is pretty straightforward. We're just going to put some glue in that groove, and then we're going to slide it over the 1/16 balsa at the front of the fuselage. Because it's a perfect square, there's no top or bottom to worry about. And it'll fit pretty snug, so we should be able to just kind of wiggle it a little bit, get it to go in, and then when it drops in, it will hold itself pretty good. So we'll wipe off the extra glue, and then we'll just set it aside to dry. You can see that I just left it leaning against something with the whole weight of the fuselage pushing down on the nose. That's a good way to let it cure. Next up, we're going to glue the tail together. We've got a vertical stabilizer and a horizontal stabilizer. There's 3 tabs and 3 grooves, and we can put our glue on those like usual and put them together. We're going to have to jack it up on something because the tabs will actually stick through the horizontal stabilizer. They're 1/8 inch long instead of 1/16, because they also will stick into the fuselage later. So the tapers go forward, and we use some sort of square while it's curing. So in this case, I just used a piece of balsa that happened to have a square corner to it, put some tape on it to hold everything 90 degrees to each other while it cures. So the final thing that we need to assemble is the wing. But before we can get going on the wing, we need to assemble this wedge. This wedge sets the angle of one wing panel versus the other one. So we'll glue it together and we'll set it aside for the glue to dry. Once the glue's dried, we can start to assemble the 2 wing panels. The very first step in assembling the wing panels is to determine which one is left and which one is right. If you look at the end of the wing panels, you're going to find a brown or black dot on the end of one panel. That is the inside of the left wing. So that'll go in the middle of the airplane, and that wing will go on the left. If there's any confusion, just tape the wing halves together and then have a look at them from the end towards the middle. The back of the wing should be twisted upward compared to the middle when you look at the end. If it twists downward, you've got the wing halves reversed. This is actually really important, so take your time and make sure you get this right before we start gluing. Now that we've got it determined, we're going to put a little bit of glue on the inside face of each of the wing halves, And we're going to push them together, and we're going to make sure that the bottom is lined up both front to back and up and down so that they meet and that they're flush. Then we'll put a piece of tape across that joint to hold it that way. Then we'll put it down on our little angle setting tool. We'll line up the joint with the very end of that wedge, and we'll get it nicely aligned. We'll take a bit of time here, and then we're going to squish some extra glue down into that joint. This is the one time we want a bit of excess glue. There's going to be a bit of a gap there, and we want to use the glue to fill the gap. The glue does shrink a little bit while it's drying, so you may want to check on this in a few hours when it's starting to get dry. And if the glue is shrunk down into the gap, put a little more glue and fill that gap again. Finally, we'll line it up carefully with our wedge again, and then we'll just put a bit of weight on it, like, about the weight of a roll of tape, just to hold everything in place while the glue dries. While the wing glue dries, we can put the tailplane onto the fuselage, assuming that we've let them both dry for at least a few hours. So we're just going to put a bit of glue where the tailplane's going to meet the fuselage, where those slots are. And then we're going to grab our tailplane, and we'll put a bit of glue on those tabs and in between the tabs. And they're going to fit perfectly into our fuselage. So we'll just take it and we'll line them up. And we push it in there, and we just make sure that it's nice and flat against the top of the fuselage. And then it's good to go, and then we'll just let it dry. Once everything's had 24 hours to dry, it's time to mount the wing to the fuselage. In this case, we're not going to use glue. We're going to slide the wing into this little wing adapter plate, and then we're going to put it on top of the fuselage. We'll take one of our small elastics, we'll start at the little lug at the front, we'll go down under the fuselage and then back up to the other lug. And you can see it wants to flip forward because we've just gone around the front. So we'll take a second little elastic, and we're going to start at one of those lugs. We're going to go diagonally across the wing, down underneath, making sure that we stay on the plastic, not on the foam, because we don't want to crush the foam. And then we're going to come around the fuselage, back over top, and over to the other lug. And that wing is mounted. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer to perfect we get it in terms of alignment, left to right and diagonally and stuff, the better the airplane's going to fly. So you can see that because it's elastic mounted, we can move this wing back and forth a little bit. And also, if it impacts the ground, it'll allow the wing to move instead of breaking. Quick test of the center of gravity. We'll get more into that in the flight testing. Well, that's it for assembling it. We'll see you in the flight test video.